Hey guys, That Mom here. So this is part 2 of my breastfeeding video. In this video, I want to share with you my personal journey through breastfeeding and hopefully share some encouragement for other moms who are going through their breastfeeding journey. If you watched part 1 of this video, you know that I was not really keen on the idea of breastfeeding. I really just signed up for a class to help me make an educated decision, but I thought going in that it wasn't going to be for me. And it was through hearing about all of the benefits of breastfeeding, not only for myself, but mainly for my baby, that I decided that I was going to do it. I did not like the idea. A lot of what they taught me about breastfeeding really just sounded horrible to me. It all just sounded really weird and unnatural. I know that breastfeeding isn't supposed to be. It's supposed to be beautiful and amazing, but it just all sounded super, super weird. But I knew that I was going to stop at nothing to give my daughter the very best, and so I ultimately decided I was going to try it. I got tons of information from my breastfeeding class. If you watched the last video, I shared some of it with you. It was really, really helpful. I was able to come home. I felt totally empowered. I had a total list of cheat sheets and information to help me be successful, and I thought everything was going to be great. And it didn't really work out that way. So when Q was born, I was able to do the skin to skin and initiate that initial breastfeeding. No problem. I thought everything was great. That entire, first night into the second day, everything was great. I would put her on. She would nurse. The nurses were checking, and it seemed like she was eating for an appropriate amount of time. If you watched the last video, you know that I had like a little chart where I logged everything, so they were able to see when she was feeding, how long she was feeding, and they said everything seemed great. And she seemed happy as can be. Really in that, first 24 hours, she really just slept a lot. I mean, she was eating when she was supposed to, but she slept a lot. And when she was awake for those short periods of time, she seemed perfectly happy. So I thought everything was working out great. As the end of her second day was coming around, the hospital gave us this piece of paper with warnings about the second night. And it explained to us how a baby's second night can be really challenging. They've spent the entire, first night and, that second day sleeping and really recovering from being born in the delivery, that into that second night, they have now rested up and they are ravenous and they just want to eat. So it kind of warned us that it could be a challenging night, where the baby was up a lot, fussier, wanting to eat a lot. We thought there was no way our sweet, perfect baby was going to be that way. Little did we know they were spot on. It probably started around 10, 11 o'clock at night, where Q was just super fussy and was wanting to eat a lot. So I would put her on. She would eat for only about 5 minutes, which they told me was totally normal. When babies are born, their stomachs are only the size of something like a marble. I mean, they're super, super tiny. So she would eat for about 5 minutes, and then she would fall asleep. And I would think nothing of it. I would try putting her down, but she would wake up only minutes later wanting to eat again. So I would latch her back on. She would eat for like 5 minutes. She'd fall asleep. I mean, this happened all night long. The second she was done eating and I would put her down, she would wake up and she would cry. So we tried walking around with her, we tried pacing with her, we tried feeding her. I mean, we did everything. By the time morning came around, I'm obviously exhausted. Daddy and I have not slept a single wink. My nipples at this point were hurting so bad I wanted to cry, just because she was non-stop feeding. And it was about this time that there was shift change. Now, the nurse who was with me all night long knew what we were going through, kept assuring me that this was very, very normal, and really was telling me everything was fine. So it's 7 a.m., time for shift change. I have the privacy curtain up because I am nursing yet again, and I hear a nurse walk in, and before she even sees us, she hears Q crying, and she goes, "That's a hungry baby." And I instantly want to punch her in the face because I've been feeding this hungry baby all damn night, to the point where my nipples wanted to fall off. So I was infuriated. I was like, I swear to you, I have been feeding her. So, it all kind of becomes a blur for me, but essentially what's happening is I have a nurse who's trying to help me get Q latched on properly. She's telling me, well, she just wants milk. This colostrum stuff isn't enough for her. And at some point, the pediatrician comes in. She can hear Q crying and can hear that Q seems hungry. She sees that I'm practically in tears. She now sees that the nurse has been helping me get the baby to feed for a while. And she's just like, we need to just give her formula. And I wanted to die. Now, I should say that this was not my regular pediatrician. My regular pediatrician was out of town, so I had like a stand-in, and I instantly did not like her. So I was like, I am not giving her formula. I took the class. I know she's supposed to exclusively be breastfeeding. I also knew I did not want to give her a bottle. I learned in the class about nipple confusion. You really should not be giving a breastfed baby any type of artificial nipple, so a bottle or a pacifier, for the first 2 to 3 weeks. So I was like, I am not giving her any of those things. We need to figure this out. So, this is the third day technically of Q's life at this point. And so I have everyone helping me. I have a lactation consultant coming in. They do set me up to start pumping because they're like, this baby wants milk. She needs more than just the colostrum to fill her tummy. So they're like, your milk needs to come in like yesterday. So they have me pumping to try and get my milk to come in. And I'm still trying to nurse Q. We're doing the best that we can, but as the day is progressing, I mean, with the assistance of the nurse and the lactation consultant, we are getting a better latch, and she does seem to be feeding better, so she does seem more content. But as the day is progressing, my child is turning yellow in front of my eyes. I kid you not. We were taking her for a walk down the hall because I was supposed to be up and moving around. And I'm like, she looks like a Simpsons character. And, sure enough, they were testing her bilirubin, and it was high. So they looked at our log. Like I said, I logged everything. And what they were basically seeing was, considering how frequently she had been nursing, she really should be having more diapers than she was having. So what this was telling us was she was not getting in as much volume as we thought she was getting in through her nursing. And through their knowledge and science, what they had basically concluded was what was happening was Q was latching on to nurse. And I mean, babies have to suck pretty hard to get any milk. And what was happening, she didn't have a great latch. They assessed a few things in her mouth. They said, oh, her mouth is a little small. Oh, she could be a little tongue-tied. But really, they couldn't find a reason why she wasn't latching well. But essentially, she wasn't latching well, which meant she wasn't getting good suction. And so they had ultimately decided she was not getting the volume in that she needed. Without getting that volume in, she is obviously not pooping and peeing, and therefore not getting rid of the bilirubin that she has inside of her, which is really important, and that's what caused her to be jaundice. And because Q was being put on and working her little tail off and essentially getting nothing, she would get frustrated and she would fight. And when she realized, when her crying and basically her little plea of, hey, this isn't working, I'm not getting what I want, wasn't being met, when her plea was not being met with something more fulfilling, she gave up. And that's why she would fall asleep, was, I'm trying my hardest, I'm telling you guys that it's not working, I'm still not getting what I need, and so I'm just going to give up and I'm going to go to sleep. Needless to say, this was heartbreaking for me. It was heartbreaking for me to know, on so many levels. It was heartbreaking for me to know that I wasn't able to give her what she needed. It was heartbreaking for me to know that she was trying to tell me that she needed more, and I didn't realize it. You know, I'm a new mom. She's only 3 days old at this point. But I was like, aren't I supposed to have some sort of maternal instinct that kicks in the second she's born that helps me know what every single cry means? And I was just devastated. I was really feeling like I had let her down. In my brain, I now know that this is not true, but in my brain, I was just like, me breastfeeding her was making her sick. It wasn't working. We weren't working. And then I had tried so hard and it's getting me nowhere. And I was just feeling super, super defeated. So it ultimately ended up happening, thankfully, because at this point, if it weren't for the fact that I had a child who was relying on me, I would have probably jumped off of the roof of the hospital. I was just feeling really low about myself. An amazing lactation consultant came in. I loved her. I'll never forget. Her name was Robin. I will never, ever, ever forget. And she was super, super, super helpful. And what we eventually had to start doing was syringe feeding Q. So the way that this looked was we had, you know, a little syringe. You know, if you've ever used a little oral syringe to give a baby or even a pet medicine, you know what I'm talking about. And attached to the syringe was this little tube. And we tried a couple different things. One was while Q was latched to the breast, we would try sneaking the little tiny, tiny tube in the corner of her mouth so that while she was nursing, I could be feeding her my pumped colostrum and milk through the syringe so that she was getting basically the reinforcement for all the work she was doing at the breast. Problem is, Q did not like having this little tiny tube, nor was I coordinated enough to really be able to figure all that out. So doing it out of the breast was not working. So what we ended up doing was finger feeding her. So we would take our little tiny finger, our pinky, because, you know, her mouth was so little, and she would be sucking on our finger. And while she was sucking on her finger, we would feed through this little tiny tube, and we would feed her through the syringe. We would try and sync up us administering food with her suckling so that it still kind of went with the natural rhythm. But I chose to do this because I didn't want to give her a bottle. I didn't want her to have nipple confusion. I had learned in the class, and I was still determined to get back to breastfeeding, so I was not giving up. Thankfully, this amazing lactation consultant was like, you don't have to give her formula. We have donor milk here. So I was able to give her breast milk. I was still giving her the colostrum I was pumping, but, you know, she wanted something of more substance. So I was also giving her donor milk. And I was pumping. I mean, I think I was pumping 15 minutes every hour. I mean, I was pumping a lot. So my milk was starting to come in, but, you know, it comes in pretty slowly. And so we were finger feeding her. I was still attempting to latch her, still attempting to feed her. But Robin was truly a lifesaver. We only had Robin for that one day, and then it kind of went back to the regular cycle. I mean, you think about it, we ended up, because Q ended up being jaundiced, what they needed to do that night was phototherapy, where she essentially is in this, she's in the little plastic bassinet that they typically use at the hospital, but they put this big like UV type light over her. She has to stay in this tank. So they did it overnight, and then the whole next day to try and get her you know, bilirubin levels down. So we ended up being in the hospital for a long time because she was jaundiced. We ended up being discharged on our 5th day postpartum. So you figure in 5 days, when their shift changes every 12 hours, you saw 10 different shifts, and in each shift I had 4 different people. I had a nurse, Q had a nurse, we had a technician who I guess just helped the nurse. I don't really know exactly what her job title really entails, and we had a lactation consultant. So we had 4 people who rotated out every 12 hours. So you're talking, I saw 40 different people over the course of my time, and each person comes in with their own set of experience and their own set of opinions, and it was really challenging. I was kind of starting to get frustrated because what one person was telling me and helping me work on for 12 hours completely changed when the next person came in at shift change. So Robin was really helpful. When we went back into the regular routine, I did not like the next lady at all. So I requested Robin again. She was able to come back in, and you know, with her, I was able to find a couple successful positions. I was still predominantly finger feeding Q to make sure she was getting the volume she needed, which we were able to tell because her outputs, her diapers were increasing, which was a huge, huge relief. So if you watched the last video, you know that I'm a big fan of logging things, and this is probably why I was living by this log. I needed to see that she was getting those diapers because that's what told me that my baby was going to get better. And so we were living and breathing by the log. I was still finger feeding her to make sure she was getting the volume in. I was attempting to nurse her, and it was time to go home. And so that's what we went home with. So that whole cheat sheet that I said that I made, I basically could throw out the frickin' window because it really wasn't going to matter. I was predominantly finger feeding Q. So we come home, and now I needed to go back in 2 days to get Q's bilirubin checked. And I had already planned on making that appointment at the lactation consultant's office. They are able to do the bilirubin checks. I would also be able to touch base with them about how things have been going breastfeeding. And so for 2 days, we were finger feeding Q. I mean, at this point, I believe she was eating something like 50 or 60 cc's. Our syringe was only 10 cc's. So that means each meal, she had 5 to 6 syringes. So this was definitely a two-person job. One person who had their finger in and was feeding with the syringe, and then another person who was prepping the next syringe, getting it lined up, and was switching out the syringe for the person feeding. So we did this. Now, if you remember from the first video, a newborn eats at least every 3 hours. Well, a breastfed newborn tends to feed sooner. So as you can imagine, it was a lot of syringes, a lot of feedings, a lot of headache. But the worst part was when I came home, the pump that I had, because I really wasn't planning on pumping, sucked. It just flat out sucked. So I didn't have donor milk at home, and I was not getting the output that I was getting with the hospital grade pump. So my boobs are very, very painful. They were getting engorged. I could feel that they were very hard. I could start to feel knots in them. I was not getting the output that I was supposed to be getting. So in those 2 days, we did have to supplement Q. As much as I hated it, we had to. I was not going to allow my baby to get sick again. So we supplemented with formula because I needed her to get her volume, because I needed her to get those diapers, because I was not going to have her be sick. And I just was pumping more and more and more frequently. But it did not seem to help. I was, of course, still trying to nurse. We were not having a ton of success. I was, you know, all fumbly, and I couldn't really figure it out. She was getting frustrated. We were not having a ton of success. But I was still trying. So we were supplementing. I was trying to pump. My boobs are hard as rocks. I'm in a ton of pain. And finally, it was time for us to go in for her bilirubin check 2 days later. And I had an appointment with the lactation consultant. And it was really helpful. I loved the lactation consultants that worked at the office in the hospital far better than I liked the ones that were on rotation. This woman was wonderful. The first thing that she helped me do that brought me immediate relief, it was euphoric. She got a good hospital grade pump on me, and she massaged the snot out of my boobs. And it's one of those, if you've ever gotten a massage, you know that hurt so good feeling. It was one of those, like, I was in so much pain as she's doing it, but it felt so good to get the relief. And she was working out so much built up milk. So for 2 days, my body was producing the milk. It just wasn't coming out because my pump sucked. So that really made me feel better. I was like, yay, I am producing milk. I'm not going to have to continue supplementing. off of that one pump alone with her massaging, I was able to produce enough for the next 2 feedings for Q. So it was awesome that I wasn't going to have to supplement for those 2. She also got us hooked up to be able to rent a hospital grade pump. She also notified us of the right pump that we should get and told us that our insurance would probably cover it. And sure enough, when we called, they did. So not only did she hook me up with an awesome hospital grade pump, but she got me all set up to be able to get a pump of my very own for free through my insurance. So mamas out there, if you are wanting to pump or needing to pump like me, check with your insurance to see if they will cover it. And if you have a referral from a lactation consultant, that would probably only help your case more. So very, very, very useful information. I was thrilled about that. Another thing that I was resistant to, but I in hindsight am thrilled that she told us to do it. She finally convinced us to give up the syringe and switch to a bottle. I was not wanting to do this because I did not want nipple confusion. But what she was actually showing me was, one, it was just more practical for her to get a bottle. The amount that she was going to eat was only going to continue to increase, and using the syringes was just not practical. But additionally, our finger was giving Q nipple confusion. Q was learning how to suck on something long and hard. I'm sorry if this is TMI, but my nipples are not long and hard like my pinky. So if Q is learning to suck on this, there is no way she's ever going to be able to learn to suck on my boob. So it was time to switch to a bottle, which definitely made my life easier. So all in all, it was extremely helpful. She helped me practice some different techniques. She set me up with a breast friend. I was previously trying to use a boppy. Nothing against boppy. I love, love, love our boppy. We use it for many, many things. However, unless you are the size of a toothpick, which, in case you can't tell, I am not, it doesn't fit around your waist to really work as being a support for breastfeeding. The breast friend was much more user-friendly for me. It has an adjustable band. It goes around. You're able to tighten it so it stays in place where you want it. So I was able to put it right up under my boobs, and so Q would line up beautifully with the breast. I mean, so she was able to help me with some really great positions. So when Q and I did nurse, it was more successful. She got us hooked up with a bottle, so at least I knew she was getting her volume in, and she helped relieve a lot of discomfort. So things were great. I went home, and that's kind of what we were doing. I was pumping. I was getting much, much better output. After that, I did not need to supplement anymore, which was awesome. I was pumping a lot, and I was still attempting to nurse, but nursing was not going well. Between nursing so frequently, like I said, Q at this point is eating every 3 hours at least, if not sooner. Between Q nursing so frequently, and then each time she nursed, I needed to pump, my boobs were going through some rough times, and my nipples were just killing me. I was in a lot of pain. So I needed to make a follow-up appointment. I was in too much pain to be able to continue on. So I went in, and I saw a different lactation consultant this time, but still just equally amazing. And what she noticed was that I basically almost had like a yeast infection on my nipples. That's why they were, sorry again if this is TMI, but for you mommies who might be going through the same thing, you need to know you're not alone. They were white and kind of getting flaky on my nipples, and every single thing about them hurt. I mean, it hurt to wear clothes, it hurt to not wear clothes and have air touching them, it hurt to have water touching them. Everything hurt. So, well, she was able to also help me get some really good positions. Even when Q had a great latch, I was still just in pain. So what this lactation consultant actually suggested was that I take a breast from nursing entirely. That I take a break for 2 weeks, and I give my boobs a chance to heal. At this point, I'm still having great output from the pump, so I was going to continue pumping. She helped us discover that we needed to use a certain type of bottle when feeding Q. One of the things that was challenging for Q was still her latch. It took a lot of work for us to get a good latch from her. And one of the problems was that she just wasn't flanging her lips the way she needed to. When a baby nurses, their lips have to be like kind of flanged up. And Q was not doing that. She was kind of sucking like that, probably because she had been sucking on her finger for so long. But that's neither here nor there. She was having a hard time flanging her lips. So this lactation consultant, her name was Julie, I loved her, she was awesome, helped us discover that we needed to change out the nipple type that we were using. We needed to go from having a narrow nipple to one that had what's called a wide base nipple. That way, when we pushed the nipple in, it would be similar, if the base was wide, it'd be similar like to a breast, and it would push up against her lips so that her lips would have to flange like they will on the breast. She also gave us a pacing technique for feeding her, because one of the things about breast versus bottle feeding is babies have to work a little harder at the breast. They have to suck harder than they do necessarily from a bottle. If you take a bottle and you hold it upside down and you just shake it a little bit, liquid will come out. It really doesn't take much force for liquid to come out of a bottle. You have to work harder to get it out of a nipple. So she had us using a paced bottle feeding technique. That way it was coming out slower from the bottle, and so that Q had to work a little harder, so that it just simulated more what the feeding experience on the breast would be. And that was to help keep Q in practice while I was going to take at least a 2-week break. She gave me a special medicated nipple ointment that was a godsend. So I kept pumping, and using my cream and healing up. And I started to resign to the fact that I don't think Q and I were going to be able to have a breastfeeding relationship. This was what our breastfeeding relationship was going to be. She would get breast milk, but she would get it from a bottle after I pumped. I know that they say that expressed breast milk loses some of its nutritional value, but I didn't care. It was still better than formula, in my opinion. I was still happy that she was not needing to get formula, that she was still getting breast milk. And so that was our life for a couple of weeks, and things were going well. I'm not going to say it wasn't challenging, because what a feeding looked like for us was that I would need to get all my pump supplies, put together the pump, rig the pump up on me. I had one of those hands-free bras, so rig it all up, sit, pump for at least 15 minutes, sometimes 20, sometimes 30, depending on the session. Then I needed to clean the pump supplies, take the milk, store the milk, prep a bottle, and then feed Q. So when Q is feeding every 3 hours, so let's say I feed her at midnight and I know she's going to eat at 3, my happy butt is getting up between 2 and 2:30 to pump before I feed her. Then I'm feeding Q. I'm cleaning all the pump supplies so that they're ready for the next time, and I'm doing this every 2 to 3 hours. I mean, so I'm not going to say it was easy. It was exhausting. Eventually I learned. I went and I got a second set of pump supplies. It helped a little bit, but like I said, you're doing this every 2 to 3 hours. If I was going to bed at midnight and not like officially starting my day until, let's say, 6, that's, 3 pumping sessions that are happening in there. I only have 2 sets. So at some point I was having to clean the supplies and do it again. Eventually I got really talented and I learned how to feed Q while pumping, so that helped shorten time. I mentioned in my baby wearing video that I had a baby carrier that allowed me to wear her and pump. So I was finding little mommy hacks on how to make pumping easier, but it was by no means easy. Taking apart all the pump supplies to clean them and sterilize them each time, I mean, it was exhausting, but I was accepting the fact that if this was what I was going to have to do for a year, this was going to be what I would do for a year. It was probably about 3 weeks after that lactation consultant, so about 3 weeks of us having an exclusively pumping relationship, that I realized, the lactation consultant had asked for me to follow back up in 2 weeks, that I should probably make that appointment. And the lactation consultant, Julie, she had recommended that I only take a 2-week break from nursing, and then I should start trying again. And here I am at 3 weeks. I have no appointment, and I have not attempted nursing. As much as I loved the idea of being able to, I was scared. We were not successful, and I was scared. And so the guilt started to weigh in. I realized I was going to need to make this appointment, and I was not going to go into the appointment saying I didn't even try to follow her recommendations. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to try this. And so Daddy was at work one day, and I was like, okay, put myself in a happy, positive frame of mind. I went and I got my breast friend. I got everything set up, and I latched Q, and it was just like, ding! All of a sudden she got it, and she did it. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, she hadn't even tried for 3 weeks, and it was just like, it clicked. I was obviously thrilled because it didn't hurt, which was really exciting. I had worked so hard and dreamt so much about her being able to do this, but I was really happy to know that all of the things that we'd been working on with the paced bottle feeding and changing out the nipples was helping. You know, I only nursed her for a little bit to keep us successful. I didn't want her to get too frustrated or anything. But I tried this for a couple days. A few times a day I would nurse her, and then I would follow up with a bottle to make sure she still got her volume. And so then I felt confident in making an appointment. So I made an appointment, and at this point Q is 5 weeks old. And I went in and they checked her weight. Her weight was good. They checked her latch. Her latch was good. They watched the feeding. The scale that they have is amazing. So what they're able to do is they are able to strip Q down and weigh her. Then I feed her. They strip her down and weigh her again, and they're able to tell exactly how much she took in. It was amazing. So that's what they did, and what she found was that the feeding was 100% successful. She took in a completely appropriate amount. And so she could breastfeed. After 5 weeks of not giving up, and 5 weeks of pumping and staying true to giving my baby nothing but breast milk, and really being perseverant, it all worked out. She could breastfeed. I will admit I was a little gun shy. I was scared. So for a couple days after going home, I kept giving her bottles and I kept pumping. But then I just decided, you know what? If Q is ready, it's time for me to be too. I can't be scared. She's telling me she's ready for this. And so we just started breastfeeding. I, of course, had to continue pumping while breastfeeding, just because I had built up such a supply that I was producing more than Q was consuming. So to avoid being engorged, I would have to pump off the excess, and slowly with time I was able to work my supply back down. I know some moms stock up and would have loved to have kept their supply up, but I didn't really need to. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I don't ever go anywhere without her. I didn't really have a need to have a big stock of breast milk, so I allowed my supply to dwindle down just to be exactly with what Q needed, and we've been breastfeeding ever since. I was beyond happy to put my pump away. I do not miss pumping. I do not care to pump ever again. I feel like I pumped enough in those 6 weeks. It was 6 weeks before Q and I were 100% back to exclusively breastfeeding. No more bottles, no more pumping, no nothing. I feel like I had pumped enough in those 6 weeks to last me a lifetime. So I happily packed away my pump, and we've been breastfeeding ever since. I don't really share this story with very many people. In my life, I have two different types of people. I have the moms who breastfeeding was completely natural for them and they never had any problems, and so they can't relate. And then I have moms who gave up and think that I'm absolutely freaking nuts for continuing to fight. I would hear from them all the time, well, don't they just tell you that sometimes it hurts and people can't do it? And I would have to say, actually, that's not true. Yes, it does hurt. That doesn't mean you can't do it. That just means you have to work a little harder, which doesn't really win you very many friends. So I couldn't really share this story with anyone. This was, you know, aside from my husband, really, this was almost like my secret struggle. I've read a lot of blogs on parents who chose not to breastfeed, and they would say, I didn't want my early weeks to be riddled with pain and agony. I wanted them to be filled with joy. And what I would say to that is, yes, I had a lot of pain, and yes, there was heartache and feeling unsuccessful, but there was so much joy and happiness and pride in knowing that I was not giving up, that I was going to stop at nothing to give my baby the very best. So you want to know what? If that meant that I had to deal with a little bit of pain, so be it. You know what? Q will never know that I was in pain. I made sure she didn't know I was in pain. When I was with her, I was nothing but a happy, loving mom. And she will never know that I was in pain. She'll never know that. But you know what? She will forever have the benefits that I gave her by giving her my breast milk. And for me, that's worth it. So yes, there was pain, but there was still joy. And I will never forget that day that lactation consultant told me that I could resume exclusive breastfeeding. The amount of joy and knowing that was my greatest accomplishment. You know, I am a new mom, I'm a first-time mom, and I just felt like that was a huge victory. Not only for, any mom, really. I mean, yes, I was a first-time mom, but for any mom to persevere the way that I did to give your child your absolute best, the joy in that moment alone surpasses any joy that anyone else could ever experience. So I will not let those people try and tell me that just because I was in pain that I experienced any less joy than they did. Yes, formula is just fine for your baby. It is just fine. Obviously, they would not let children consume it if it was not suitable for them. But you want to know what? Every formula out there is saying, most like the breast, most like breast milk. If they're trying to be breast milk, why wouldn't I just give my baby breast milk? It makes no sense. And yes, while formula might be fine, if I have the option to give Q something better than what was just fine, I was going to do it. I was going to fight at nothing. Thankfully, I was educated. I took a course that told me that all these problems that I was having were normal. Some women encounter them, and that they were easily overcome with the proper education and support, and I sought that out. And I would really encourage any other moms who are struggling. Breastfeeding is not always easy. The people who say it's easy are full of shit. It's not always easy. It can be really freaking hard. I am a testament to that. And if you too are having struggles, don't just think you can't breastfeed. You can. You absolutely can. For some people, they just have to work a little harder. Go and seek the help. Reach out to a lactation consultant. Talk to your OBGYN. Talk to your pediatrician. Ask them where you can find a lactation consultant or a support group. You can absolutely, positively do this. I'm here to tell you that you're not alone. Other moms struggle, and that you do not have to give up. You can do it. I hope that you found this information helpful and encouraging. I hope that any other moms who are out there struggling and feel like giving up, I hope this gives you a second wind and helps, encourage you to go out and get the help and keep fighting to give your child the very, very best you can. You can work your way back to breastfeeding. For 6 weeks, I struggled for 6 weeks. And now Q and I are happily breastfeeding. There's no pain, there's no discomfort, there are no struggles. She's perfectly happy and perfectly healthy, and you can have that too. Don't give up. If you have any questions, or if you just need someone to be cheering in your corner, you need a little support, comment. I will be there for you. I never want a mommy to feel alone in this. This was a deep, deep struggle for me, and I would love to be there for other moms. So please comment, reach out to me. I am there for you. You can do this. You are a great, wonderful, loving mommy, and you can make it through this. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to watch more, check out one of my other videos and subscribe to my page. I'm also really active on other social media outlets, so please follow me on Instagram and Twitter. You can click on the links on my page or search me using @officialthatmom. Thank you again so much for watching, and always remember, don't be afraid to be that mom. I'll see you next time. Bye.